welcome to this talk. We're going to talk a little bit about our journey at JP Morgan Chase. And before we get going on JP Morgan Chase perspective, I wanted to kind of give you some story about growing potatoes. JP Morgan Chase is not in business of growing potatoes. If you don't know about it, JP Morgan Chase is the largest bank in the United States. Just about every financial product that you can think of at JP Morgan Chase offers it, from lending to loans to financial support perspective to investment banking, consumer banking, all of it. I'm going to get to the part of why growing potato in just a minute, but before that, let's go to the next slide on that one. So you might have heard this thing up quite a bit. If you are in the Kanban implementation business, I'm sure you guys all heard of it. Kanban's great, but I have a very unique challenge on it. So one of the things that, just to kind of introduce myself to it, I'm with Dharmesh Chavda. I manage software engineering at JP Morgan Chase, and Abigayle, she manages a lot of our agility transformation, and she's a wonderful coach with us on it. So, in our journey, her and I have worked together for a long period now. And in our journeys, we had a conversation around the Kanban works for it, and my challenge was, I have a very unique problem in my world, and Kanban may work, but I'm not really ready for it. And at that point, and kind of to explain a little bit, what is my world so complicated? So within the JP Morgan Chase and the group that this particular study was done in it, the group that I managed was onboarding. This is where all of the onboarding of JP Morgan Chase acquiring clients gets onboarded. So I have about 600,000 clients that are already loaded in the system. We onboard about 35,000 different clients every single year. This is also a system of record for the company. So every part of the business, whenever they want to add any new features, I'm the responsible for getting the customer data connected to it, making sure that we have all the features and enable those features for our clients on it. So every system that has to come up with any single project, I have to worry about enabling those features in there, which means it's fantastic. You are always the center of the universe, but that center of the universe also brings you with another problem of, well, you're on a high demands all the time. Your teams have often needed in every single project. You never have enough people, and never have enough people to ever connect into the project. So of course, every single time you get Dharmesh, I can't get enough of your people. Your people is not fast enough for getting work done. Can you just get a magic button, just press it, and get every project done really fast on it, so you're not the bottleneck of every team member. Again, with that part of it, it's always an easy one to go get more budget for it, which I did. In this particular team, I could go get an infinite budget. In fact, the conversation was not about, Dharmesh, how many people do you need? The conversation was more about how many people can you get ready fast enough so teams can, so you're not the bottleneck on it. So the team grew really, really fast. And in this part of it, where we had teams growing on it, I had one team that was doing a Kanban. Abby was leading that team and working with the team, and she implemented Kanban. She comes up with a great, the teams was doing really well, all the statistic coming out of them was really well, and she comes up with the ideas like, maybe we can do this thing for the whole entire program that you have. And my answer to her, this running joke was, Abby, that's okay. Growing potatoes in Idaho is easy. Everybody does it. Idaho is just what Idaho does that. But I have to grow potatoes on Mars. So this is where the potato growing thing came up to it is, well, I have a very unique challenge, and I don't know if Kanban would really work for me. Of course, we always believe that, Abby was going to pull it off this one, especially when I challenge her this way on it. So, of course, all of you know, if I'm standing here, that means Kanban did work for us. And Kanban worked really, really well for it. So let me kind of tell you some of the tools that Kanban gave me that I felt like it was a differentiator for me as a leader in the engineering side of the house on it. So this chart that you're looking at it, of course, this chart has the stories at the bottom part of it and the calculated days on top of it. When we started the journey that we had, if you look at this one, we had about 30 stories that are going through the system, and average time that it was taking the stories to do was about 62 days. when we got done with this particular teams on it, and we look at it, a few of my teams were producing up to 60 stories. We cut down the number of days that it takes for stories to go through it, and I actually had one less team, but the attrition was going on within the team. I actually didn't have as big of a team as I started with it. So from the Kanban perspective, ability to see this data was incredible for me, and also be able to actually go and have that conversation with my leaders, my partners, that yes, we are making progress and things are getting faster. You may not feel that way yet, because I'm still the center of universe over there, and I can't. It was never going to be fast enough for it. So that was one of the chart. The second one of them, if I can explain a little bit about this chart on it. These are all the projects. We changed the name of the projects, of course, because they're JP Morgan Chase's project. But this is the real data of projects that we had. So in this particular chart, if you look at this one, can you identify one project that you think that's actually not doing really well on it? All right, I'm going to give you a little hint on it. Wrong button. Asteroid mining part of it. So let's say, look at this project on it. All my projects were able to kind of, when you chart these projects on the charter graph, they're wonderfully, you can see that they're able to complete within the time that we have. And the stories were relatively below my SLAs on it, and they're cranking along really well. However, the asteroid mining is the problem where I have a majority of their stories cause me more problems. Their projects was causing me SLA problems, which is fantastic for me as a leader to have that sort of data. Now, let's assume that David was the product owner for this particular project. I can take this to David and I say, David, what are we going to do about it? Why is it always your project that's causing the problem in my system? Is the definitions not ready for it? Are we not have the technology problem? Is my team solution has a problem to it? So there was a lot of good information that kind of I was able to get from some of this data that our teams processed.
All right, so these are based on our experience, the culture of JP Morgan Chase, just acquired knowledge over time. These were our 10 tips for transformation success. Okay, it always starts with you have to have purpose, you have to shape that demand. You want to design with intention, okay? You've got to get people problem solving together. You want to launch empowered teams. So kind of, tagging on to David's conversation yesterday, right? You're trying to create teams and individuals that don't need you. So leveraging empowerment was something that we did pretty successfully there, and we'll walk through that in a little bit. But also you want to build skills for demand, and then you also want to build skills with the demand. So understanding that there's two dynamics there, that you have to make those kinds of investments are really important. And then reordering work, replenishing the work, and then having quality by policy. Okay, those are all kind of the things that we learned over time that led to transformation success for us.
Yeah, so let's go deep dive in all of these things. These are, as we said, these are 10 tips on our expense on it. So let's start with this first one on it. What does this discovering purpose even mean? Abby, do you want to kind of talk about what's the...
Yeah, so honestly, as a coach, I get leaders coming to me all the time, and they sort of have this preconceived notion of what they want. Like, just come in and teach them something, right? Chase in general, you've got to understand, we've been on an agility journey for like over a decade in the technology space, okay? We have Scrum there, we've done scaling methods, you can find lines of business that have less, you can find lines of business that have safe, you have areas that are leveraging Kanban, okay? It's kind of all in the mix. And as somebody that's considered an agility leader, a coach in that organization, I often get like, oh, just teach them Scrum better. Or just, I don't know, fix them. They don't talk to each other. Right? And that's what I'm getting when they're coming to me. If I stop there, I wouldn't really get to the outcome that they're trying to get to. I wouldn't kind of boil it down to what is it that they're really trying to achieve, what is success really going to look like to them, so that I have a chance, the team has a chance, and the leader has a chance to actually create a win here. So we had the same thing here.
Yeah, so this is the same similar conversation started. Beside the growing the potato side of it, this was the second conversation. I was like, what do I need from the team on it? So what I end up telling her is like, hey, look, we have teams that are really growing. I'm hiring a lot of people on it, and I can't leave all the new people coming into it in one particular team and then have all the people that I've been here for in another team over here. So I need to reorganize the teams, and that's kind of where the conversation started. Now, of course, it had a deeper meaning to it than just that's reorganizing the team part of it. That was one part to it. But then when you look deep down into it, what I really meant on it is that I don't have enough experts within my teams. These are systems that are developed over 20 years. There are system experts that have moved from different locations to relocated to different locations. So we have attrition where we lost people. We have SMEs that we needed. So I had didn't have enough expertise to kind of teach them. And the teams were growing to I can't use the traditional way of training also. So I can't put all of them in a room and say, here's the code and just go learn from the code perspective, or I'll tell you all the business knowledge there is to it and all in PowerPoint deck that you can just go and teach them also. So realistically, that wasn't the training model was not also going to work on it. And then the last one was something that improves the volume and speed of it as well. So from team perspective, of course I got the big budget to be able to hire more people, but that's because I needed to continue to deliver to it, and I need to be able to get them faster delivery part of it.
Yeah, so once we'd had this conversation kind of boiled down, like, okay, what is growing potatoes on Mars? What's that supposed to look like? As I started doing observations across the group, the teams, what I was finding is that we had some conflicts in the roles. So we had application development managers that were also a lot of times prioritizing the backlog. They were trumping kind of the product owner in the space because they were like, well, my technology backlog also needs priority, and rather than negotiating with them, they just overrule them, right? That was it was a cultural aspect of it. When I was looking at the teams, right, because obviously, with Kanban, the idea is to evolve it. But looking at all the behavioral markers that they had, we had to break the anchoring that they had to their current groups. So they were highly competitive with one another. That was part of the culture that had been built into the program. And so there was no motivation for them to collaborate with each other, to share knowledge with each other. And it was through no fault of the teams. It was just, there was no reward in it for them. And so, we saw these skill silos that had happened because of that behavior. It also, when I looked at the output of the teams, there was a lot of variability in terms of what you were gonna get from those teams. You could definitely tell where their skill sweet spot was. When they had certain types of work, they were very, very quick, and then other stuff, it took a really, really long time. Okay, and then the other part of it is that the managers, there were multiple managers that were in the structure, and they were giving conflicting priorities. Okay, so we had like a QA manager that had priorities, we had development managers that had priorities, our senior developers reported to somebody else. So me as the coach with any given team, I could be working with anywhere from 2 to like 4 managers, depending on kind of who was in that mix. Okay, so we recognized, even though I know everything that we've heard would say like try to avoid a reorg, looking at it and knowing what we wanted to get out of it, there was no way to avoid it. So it was like, all right, don't waste a good crisis. If we're gonna do it anyway, right, let's do something that's innovative, let's do something that's different than what's been done before, and let's see what kind of foundation we can put under these teams to get this performance that you're looking for. Okay, now, shaping demand. Anybody that knows me has probably heard me say, you gotta be using your ABCs. Always be contracting, okay? No matter what, as a coach, you should always be contracting. You should always be qualifying what you want. The thing is, we as coaches, if we've been in the game for any amount of times, we know that we can't install solutions alone. Okay, we're not a magic wand. Yes, we are magical because we know we have expertise, we have knowledge, we have pattern recognition, and we have great suggestions. But we know from the change management principles that if they don't agree to take them, it doesn't matter how smart we are. It matters zero, okay? Also, teams need a strategy. So I will tell you, I am a great generator of energy. I can generate so much change energy that it hits the roof. But if the team has no way to sustain that, nothing within their structure that will sustain it when I walk away, it will not hold, okay? And I know probably some of us in this room, we had these big changes, we did some really cool things, and then we walk away, and if we try to go back to them, say 3 months, 6 months, a year later, and you're like, all the practice is gone. How sad, okay? And then, so this was our list. And when I say our list, I worked with some other coaches. Some of you in the room are probably familiar with Adam Shue and Gabe Abella. Okay, there are 2 other coaches at JP Morgan Chase. So I collaborated with them, and we pooled the knowledge that we had over the course of several years that we had been doing these kinds of transformations together, and we came up with this readiness criteria. We really wanted to protect not just ourselves, because we're 3 people in an organization that has 200,000 employees across the world, right? There aren't enough of us. So we always wanted to be qualifying, are you ready? What is it going to take in order for you to have a successful change? And so we would put this list in front of the leaders. We put it in front of him, and we said, look, can you say yes to all 12 of these things? Because if you tell me yes, I'm gonna hold you accountable to what you said. I'm gonna hold you accountable to that yes. Now, me, as I got into the coaching game, this list made me very, very nervous at first, because I was like, oh my God, if I'm telling somebody that's 2 levels above me, no. A, am I gonna get in trouble? And B, does that mean that they're gonna put it out there in the ether that I'm not helpful? But the truth is, no. Because of the competitive culture inside Chase, when you tell them, no, you're not ready, they don't like to hear that, and so they'll go and do the stuff it takes to get you to say yes. I had an example of that where I had told one of the managing directors that, you're not ready because you're telling me you can't say yes to number 6. 3 months later, that person came back and she said, okay, I can say yes to everything now. Can I get on your calendar? So this really does work, but always be contracting throughout. Always be going back to this, holding folks accountable to this readiness list. It'll really help you in your coaching game. Okay. Now, designing with intention. I told you in the what I found there, we had role contention. And so since we were going to do a reorganization anyway, we couldn't avoid it, then let's leverage the crisis and let's get this stuff clarified. Now, I told you that we have a Scrum background. So you'll notice backlog owner, Scrum Master, those were in there. But we know the knowledge from Kanban, and so the way we structured the backlog owner's role, it was set up to function like a service request manager. Our team leaders, which in Scrum, right, they don't really have a role for your development manager. So a lot of time the development managers will give you resistance just because they're I feel like I just lost my job a little bit. In this scenario, we leveraged the service delivery manager framing for how we clarified that role. So basically here you have the division of what I called the 3 Ps. Okay, you have your backlog owners that were in charge of the product. You have the team leaders that were in charge of your people, right? Developing them, improving the quality, those kinds of things. And then the Scrum Master was in charge of process. Okay, so we were set up kind of like flow managers, if you're familiar with that kind of language there. Okay, but everybody had to have a very clear role. Okay, the other thing that we did is that we designed the structure pretty intentionally there. Okay, and this is where a lot of our effort went into. So we probably did about 2 straight months of getting everybody on board, getting living principle number 2, change principle number 2 of getting agreement for this change. Okay, we spent 2 months persuading for the structure that we wanted. The people that were going to be in these roles, like, can we get them to agree to do them? Are they willing to take the risk of doing something different than what they've been doing in order to do this? And fortunately, yes, they did. All right. So, problem solving. I told you we had a competitive environment. Guess what? Just because you say you should fix problems together does not mean that they will. Okay, you have to have points where they're going to have this conversation. And we created a couple different ones that maybe broke the mold a bit.
Yeah, so before, I'm standing in front of an agile crowd, so anti-agile meeting is definitely a catchy word for all of you guys on it. What the hell do I mean with that part of it? The situation was that, in the teams, I get to hear from my backlog owners, my team leaders, this is not working out for me. And my conversation would be like, have you had a conversation with the team leads on it? And the team leads like, yeah, I've talked about this, it's not going anywhere. And then Abby would have another conversation about, this is not working on it. And the conversation was, well, have you had a chat with the leaders on it? I said, yes, I have. So the answer was often what I got back is that everybody has talked to everybody, but they all still have problems. And then the part of this is one of the reasons why I said, all right, you know what, we're going to have a meeting. We're not going to worry about the wording of it. We're not going to worry about what's the proper way of saying, don't call people resources, and fine, whatever, call people resources. That's okay. I need to get down to understanding what is the problem so that we can at least create a better framing to how are we going to solve this problem on it. So I set up the meeting name at that point, anti-agile meeting. I said, I want to be able to get to the real conversation of what is and not worry about the wording of what is going to be, what's going to be the problem with that part. One of the first ones I had to start with it is like, I'm not getting enough out of these teams. I need to be able to sustain this business, and I need to be able to make projects that are coming into it, and I'm not getting enough velocity out of the teams on it. Call it bad, this is what it was. And when we work through the problems, how are we going to actually get there? And it also allowed Abby to be able to come into it and be able to coach, this may be the right way of doing that. And there were times where the teams came back and said, I'm not liking the way this coaching is going to it. And that was a really rough one for Abby to have it.
I kind of called this the not being nice meeting. It was like, look, everybody just needs to take the rose-colored glasses off, and if you need to, take the gloves off, because I can't help you if you aren't saying what the real problem is. And at first, I'll tell you, they very much were still playing very, very nice. So we almost staged sort of a behavior model that we wanted to show. So it was like, just give me a real challenge, and then I'll leverage the facilitation in the room so that we can start showing them the pattern of behavior that we want.
We did something what Chad talked about, acting on that one. Worked really well on that.
Yes. And then the other meeting that we had to facilitate that, that feedback loop around how to improve was we did the hub level retro. Okay, so we would bring representation from each of the teams. The team leaders would be there, the backlog owners would be there. And these ones, it took us a little while to get right. They were kind of an epic failure for probably the first 3, where it was just like they couldn't coalesce around a particular problem that they wanted to solve. It was just kind of, everybody just wanted to say that there was problems, but nobody was ready to start coming up with solutions. So we had to keep tweaking the formatting, and I would say it had to deepen my skills as a coach, because I needed to start asking different questions in the room. Because at first, I was smartest girl in the room. Everybody just directed, Coach, how do we fix it? And I was like, look, I can't be the sole source of information for you guys. I'll throw out some suggestions. Now you try. You give me one. We eventually broke the pattern, and this became a very successful meeting. We were able to leverage this feedback loop to obviously get the improvements that you saw, earlier in the slide deck. But we figured out through this a lot of ways to get better. We found probably more ways to not change at all. And then we found a few ways to actually get worse. But because of this, we also had ways to just back that change out and say, okay, we're not going to keep doing that. Let's do something else. Okay. All right, launching the empowered teams. This started with a training. So we had sort of that punctuation point. This is when we're going to change. And I had learned my lesson from doing some piloting with Kanban elsewhere in the organization, how important education was. So they needed to understand, number one, what was the behavior pattern that I wanted them to exhibit, and dial it into the what's in it for me channel. Like, what was in it for them to change the way that they were doing things? What were they going to get out of it? Now, fortunately, because I had run a pilot, obviously where we grew potatoes in Idaho, right? I sort of had my aces in the room that were like, yeah, we're way less stressed. Like, we get more stuff done. You know, we're not crunched at the end of the time box. You know, we're able to get things done and sustain it, and it's been great. Like, we love working on the team, right? So I had those aces in the hole to kind of help with that. But I realized how important the education was.
Yeah, and I think, you know, once we got the training done with about 40 people in a different room, you know, in a room part of it, one of the other things that we needed to go and select the teams on it. And Abby's going to talk a little bit about how we got the team selection happen. But one of the key things that we needed to do is, you know, provide a job security in that part of it, but not role security. And what I mean by that is, you know, in that meeting when we're going to go and do self-selection part of it, there are no QAs in my teams. No more. We only have T-shaped engineering. So we needed a QA skill set. We need a business analyst skill set. But there are no title, or there's no particular role that says this you are. All of the teams that reports into my organization are software engineers. If they didn't have the skill set, we certainly expected to give them trainings on it. We had programs where we sent our QA engineers into a development workshop for 13 weeks. Full-time job is for them to go through and learn the coding part of it. They didn't come out and to be the best Java developers, but they now understood a lot more. They were able to contribute to smaller stories on it. They were able to contribute to testing in different ways of it. So it certainly helped to grow that part. But sometimes it's not going to be for everybody. Sometimes I can say I'm done with it. I don't want to be changing my skill set. It's one thing that I had to kind of stand up and tell them. It's like, okay, I'll find you a new job. It may not be with my team, but I will help you find somewhere else in it. So we're not going to fire you. But if you're going to come into this room to do a team selection, I do need you to be open to whatever the team needs.
Yeah, so giving them that opt-out clause, right, gave us just already that feeling that this is something different that they were going to get to experience. Going into the team selection day, okay, it was very important, number one, that he give I trust you. Whatever you guys decide is going to be respected. And if for some reason you can't form teams, like, I will do it as your leader. You can throw it back to me, okay? But he was framing that up in such a way that it was like, this is your opportunity if there are people that you want to work with, that you haven't had a chance to work with, you're going to get to choose your team. So going into the day, I will tell you, during self-selection days, it's not for the faint of heart for the coach, because you're riding the roller coaster with the team. Sometimes there can be some emotions in the room. There can be some conflicts that you weren't aware of that all of a sudden emerge from that space, and you've got to be able to pivot. You've got to be able to sort of be the salve to quiet the friction there. But the way this works is they get to choose who they're going to work with. They generate the skills that are important in order to do any of the demand that comes in, and then they're choosing how they're going to balance this out. Okay, but he had a little more fun for me in terms of self-selection.
So team self-selection was, I think, if we're doing a transformation, for me this one was actually a fantastic tool that turned out, initially, when Abby and talked about, like, let's go through the self-selection part of it, I was probably the most nervous about this part of it. This was the best way to get me fired really quickly. going into a room and saying, we're just going to have all the friends going to work together on it, and all the people that are not going to like each other, they're going to be together on it. But I think the process was fantastic, that they walked through the program in mind, and I think that was really good to turn the conversation into, don't worry about your team on it. Is the program's going to be successful if you guys play as a team part of it? And the answer was at that point that some people were like, yeah, but I can see we're going to be successful, but this table is not going to be successful. So yeah, you know what? You have to go over there and sit there part of it, even though I'd love to work with you. And also got a conversation happening with the team to say, I would love to learn Java. I don't have a skill set. And the people, in this side, like I have 3 people that knows Java, but I don't have anybody that knows QA. Come over here. We're going to teach you how to do this part of it. Those created a lot of those intention that, as a manager, you could try to create those paths for them, and it was never going to work out for it because I'm the one who told you to say, can you help this person out on it? Be like, yes, sir. When I get done with my work, I will help this person out. Everybody wants to help, but then they also have to get their work done. So the concept was working really well. Of course, I would have loved to be in part of that meeting, but I wasn't allowed.
I kicked him out.
Yeah, we weren't allowed. None of the managers were allowed. So all of the team members were, this is where the creating the leadership within the team came up. We had no leaders in there. It was a team, all of the teams in there, and then everyone become a leader part of that conversation. So that was fantastic. So of course, that since it worked for teams on it, then easy to kind of get carried away with it and say, well, why doesn't it work for the selecting your own manager part of it? Now, I've never gotten choice to select my manager. Even if I had an A/B choice of it, that would be fantastic to have. So we got the team selection happen. The team selected themselves. And then we had a number of managers in the group. And I said, how about teams turns around and actually interview the manager they want? And ask the manager, what are you going to do for us? What are you going to actually help us, help us achieve? Are you going to help us focus this way based on my team part of it? You are probably a better manager versus this manager is probably better for me. So we turned this thing around on a teams to say, all right, how about you go select your managers, and then why stop there on it, right? If you're going that part of it, select your scrum masters too on it. In fact, in these teams, when the new position opened up, the team actually did the interview for us and then came back with the team to say, here's a couple of people we like. Can you select one or other one on it? Yeah. And they were instantly bought into being able to train the person because they had the say into bringing the person in there. This particular model was really groundbreaking for me for creating these teams that they were new teams, but they were instantly gel team. This whole idea of norming, forming, storming side of the house is too slow for me. And this was the fantastic way to get the entire thing happen really, really fast.
And just so you know, like the manager and the scrum master, we ran it like speed dating. So the teams were kind of positioned, and then we were all rotating through, and they interviewed us. They were basically hiring us to help them or to work with them. So that was part of that process as well.
The best part was that I was the only one, so they couldn't select anybody else on it. So they had no choice but to selecting me on it.
Yep. All right, so building skills. This was really, really critical, and I see Martin in the room. I really took your skill liquidity stuff to heart. That became like my new mantra after 2019's conference. What I truly believe that without skill liquidity, you really can't do agility. If you don't have optionality for where work can go, you don't have the ability to pivot. It's going to be much more difficult. So I highly, highly recommend if you are a coach, a consultant, and when you're putting together your engagements, include something around how they're going to build skills. Make that intentional. So we did that in 2 ways, right? We, first of all, we were doing, a lot of training that was for the demand. Now, I told you that we were kind of structuring the team leaders in a position to be kind of the people protectors, right? Building up the skills, building up the knowledge, and protecting the quality of the output. Okay, so we probably did 3 months where there was at least 2 sessions per week of learning different aspects of this product that team had not worked on before. Okay, this group of teams that had formed. The team leaders obviously didn't want to have all the pressure that, we're always the ones that are doing all the teaching, so they started leveraging the senior most folks. Okay, they put that in their development plans, you're responsible for teaching a session that you are a subject matter expert in. Okay, so it really helped engage the group in building the knowledge. Okay, the other thing that we did, with building skills for the demand, is we really started visualizing the, visualizing the expertise. So you can see this is kind of this was an exercise that we were running with them where they would check in with this like every month. Okay, but we called it Close the Gap. It was sort of a program initiative that was going on, and they would visualize the skills that they needed and how many people on the team could actually do those things independently. How many of them could actually do it without help, okay? And their whole goal was to get that stuff shifting to the right. They wanted to make sure that as many people on the team knew that area, knew how to do that particular task, right? They wanted to make sure that they all knew. And we know that we'll only get the behavior that we're rewarding. So if somebody was teaching, we leveraged an internal rewards appreciation site to keep encouraging, right, and reiterating why that was important. Then as far as, building skills with the demand, okay, we had policies in place, right? We were going out of a single backlog, so we had to have a way that we were going to distribute the work. And we did not get this right the first time, I will tell you. So initially we were like, okay, we'll make this like a democracy here. We'll present the stories that are important, the priorities for us to get done, and then we'll have the group just volunteering, for the work, right? Seems simple, seems democratic. Well, this did not work because more than one team would want the story. And then our idea was like, oh, well, then we'll just have them do this pitch to the rest of the program, like why it would be best for the program for that team to have it. I told you they're competitive, right? Their competitive snake reared its head on this one. It just so happened that the way they formed, there was one team leader that had one extra person than the other one, right? It wasn't an even-Steven split. And so what they'd start doing is they would politic ahead of time to get the team that also reported to their same manager to vote with them so that they would get the work. So they'd were constantly kind of outvoting each other. So we were like, all right, this is not gonna work. Scrap that. All right, now what are we gonna do? So then we created this round robin picking order. Then they started cherry picking the backlog. So then we had to put in more policy. But eventually we landed on the sweet spot where it was like you opted into the round robin round, and that opened up kind of this many slots in the backlog. This was the things that you could pick from just to make sure that the priorities still got done. But that's sort of what we were doing kind of with the demand. And it really built a lot of skills. We were actually very, very resilient. It didn't matter who was on vacation. It didn't matter, kind of what the work was. Within about 3 months, we were starting to be able to kind of put that work anywhere. So we had very high optionality.
Yeah. So, as I only get to hear all the complaints about in this transformation. So this is a new one that sort of came up on it. There's too many meetings in this space. There's too many places that where I have a need for a senior manager, so senior developers. They're scattered into lots of different meetings, lots of different places into it. And one of the things that we find out is that we are having all these Scrum, refinement meetings all the times for all the 4 different teams that are going through it. So there's a lot of refinements happening. This is where we got to break the Scrum a little bit on it. Is that, well, you know what? We just need to stop the refining. If we have enough stories already ready, and my team can't actually go through those stories on it, what's the point of continuing to go refine these stories? Stop using those time. Stop wasting that time toward refinement, and actually let's get the more work done through our system. So with that, we actually reintroduced this reorder work point where, if we had a sprint and a half sort of work refined already, then we stopped having these conversation around refinement, and we used that time toward actual work from the team. So that really helped the teams speed up some of the work on it.
All right, and then replenishing work. So they were not ready for a replenishment cadence right out of the box. You know, they had planning and that was working for kind of what they were trying to do at the team level. But what we started to see is, okay, we got this improvement and then it just sort of leveled off and it sort of plateaued. And as he said, he needed speed and he needed volume. He needed output. So I did some analysis on what had been occurring. Was there any kind of trend or any kind of pattern? And what I was able to figure out, myself and one of the other team leaders, number one, we needed dependency guidance that needed to be reflected in the way we prioritized. And then the other part of that was we needed to also look at the mix of the work, okay? Some of the things that we found is, you know, if we were too heavy on project-based work, or if we were too heavy in a single project, the cycle times would slow down, okay? If we went too heavy on sort of the technical backlog and the automation work, we would slow down. So we created some allocation policies, and then we started to have just a very quick, almost similar to like a Kanban meeting, right? It was about 15, 20 minutes where we would come in, we would say, look, here's how many slots are going to be open for the planning tomorrow. How do you want to fill these? And then we would look and check and make sure that we had met the allocation policy, that we didn't go too heavy in one project, that we were respecting the dependencies, and this got the engine revving again, okay? So this got us, you know, improving again. All right, and then kind of our last tip, right? The quality by policy. So we're an organization, we use Jira, okay? Developers do not appreciate Jira. They do not want to log into it. Our developers in particular really did not want to go into it. And I didn't think it was a good use of Scrum Master time to be tracking down and encouraging them, threatening them to do their updates. It really wasn't yielding any fruit. There was no improvement from it. And the Scrum Masters didn't sign up to be police. Okay, so we started to move, because we had the luxury of being co-located, okay, we turned into physical boards. It was like the day that I added avatars that had their pictures, it's like I let a bomb off on the floor, because they all wanted to see what picture was there, you know, what did somebody else pick, and like all the energy around these physical boards was just electric. So we started out, you know, just taking, okay, look, we had been doing all this subtasking in Jira, so we put these on physical Post-it notes, which is what you see in the picture there on the left. They very quickly were like, this is repetitive. Like, we do the same step every single time to get it to that definition of done. Why are we wasting time and Post-it notes doing this? And at that point, I said, okay, well, let's give it an orientation, right? 4 Ds of stories. They're supposed to be discovery, they're supposed to be design, development, and delivery. Now, their definition of done gets them, you know, ready for a UAT, or a user acceptance testing. So it was like, okay, let's use that. How would you orient these tasks against kind of that model? What are the checkpoints that you should have to make sure that quality is baked in? And so there was pull criteria in here that, you know, would be some kind of team level review or some kind of interim demo. And we were able to, you know, drop our quality issues, because we kind of took a hit when we did the transformation. We had a bunch of new folks working on work that they never worked on before. But once we solidified around what the policies were and what good quality code had to look like, not only did we get back what we lost, but then we also improved another 30% on top of it, which was very cool. It was something we were really proud of. All right, so we did have a portfolio board, okay? This thing went through a ton of evolution, and this isn't even all of it. This is just some of the versions that I had. But you can see kind of it had a very basic feel, and it just kept expanding. There was more and more information that was there. And fortunately, he would always go to bat for me putting sticky notes and tape on very nice new building decals. Okay? But we had been doing this for about a year, creating that social proof in the environment, because what Chase, there's the right way, the wrong way, and the Chase way, and Chase needs to know that Chase can do it. So we have to have the social proof from inside the organization in order to influence other parts of the organization. Okay, so we had created the social proof that, look, you can scale here, you can get improvements from this, and at that point, we did a bigger transformation. I was pairing even greater with Adam Shu and Gabe Abella for what we called domain alignment. So this brought our product folks in, and I had somebody that really took to the knowledge in Kanban, and we built the overall board for the whole domain. And they used it very successfully up until the pandemic, and then it had to find electronic means. But this was our product lead. So all in all, that overall portfolio board probably had about 200 people that was their work that we could visualize. Okay.
Right. So we have about 10 minutes left. Love to open up for any questions that we can answer.
About 7 or 8 minutes.
Perfect.
All right. So we have time for questions. Yes.
Closest to it.
Hello, testing. Okay, yeah. So you talked about looking at dependency analysis and a refinement step, but you didn't talk about upstream in that context, or you didn't map it into the upstream concepts that we have. And then later, you also talked about the product development team, or the product management team taking on this. So. Did they implement a full upstream type process, or where are you at on that?
Yes, so obviously, they started about a year behind us, and they were doing, one of the things that they really gravitated to quickly was limiting how many initiatives. They finally started to understand that idea of what are we going to do right now, what are we doing later, and then what are we actually throwing out. So they started having that conversation, which was a conversation that they weren't having before. They could see in the model that we had created, like we had we love discards. And in particular, we love discards when they never left the backlog. And so that was something that they gravitated to as well. And so they were all about like, how can we get things out? How can we be like them and get things out of the system, before we've really invested much in it.
You're moving that direction.
Yeah, it's, we know it's a journey. There's not an easy button that just makes them pop out and do everything that you need them to do. But, as they were seeing the value, in what was happening, they were taking to the practices more and more. Yeah.
When it comes to the whole team selection thing, what was the demographic of the people? Were these FTEs, or if they were vendors, what sorcery from this morning did you use to pull that off?
Yes, a lot of the people that were in the room. So we had two different hubs on it. So we had I had teams in Tampa, I had teams in Plano, and I had teams in India. So we chose to do those things at a hub level. So all teams at the people that we have within the one particular hub, they're going to make the teams together, and we're going to have the other one. We've done different places where we've done this cross hub teams on it, and that really did not work well for us. So we wanted to have co-located teams. In that co-located teams, we had primarily employees. We did have some of the time and material contractors in there, but they were very far and few between in there.
Yeah. I guess because we were paying for them, we got to do what we wanted in some ways.
And they were not an MSA teams on it, right? So if they were coming in as an MSA team, then they were really specifically hired to do a particular work on it. This was more of a time and material because I needed to expand. I needed to be able to hire them, so they were time and material plus ability to hire. Sure. I think.
Yeah, around the team selection process, whether selecting team members or their managers, did you ever have to step in and do an intervention if you saw they were kind of veering in a direction that would actually be counter to what the team should be trying to achieve? Like if they were maybe wanting to pick a low bar manager to have easier workloads or something like
So
that?
I'll tell you, at least I'll let Abby, ask you to tell you about the team part of it because I wasn't allowed in there. But from the manager perspective, I did have that conversation with the teams on it. I had one manager that teams did not want to select it. It was a new manager that was part of it. And the question was, what were you concerned about? Of course, managers are not in that one. It was really a conversation with team and I, and really being open about it to say, what are the concerns that you had around this particular person? Well, he's new. Yeah, we don't know if he's going to be able to, really manage us well on it. And those are the concerns that I had, which was actually a fantastic conversation. You never get to have that conversation and say, what do I as a leader have to help my manager so that they can serve you a little better on it? So that was a conversation that did happen. Similar to Scrum Master wise, of course, Scrum Master selection also went through the same way. Scrum Masters weren't there. I was there as in the team having that conversation. That went relatively smooth on it from the Scrum Master perspective. I don't know. I'm sure there were a lot of situations like that in team side of it.
Yeah, so, with that self-selection, it definitely held up some mirrors that we had to strategize on quickly. I can tell you in the team selection, the team at first, they really struggled because of the competitiveness that was embedded in the group. At first, they flat out, we went through, I think 3 or 4 rounds, and they flat out couldn't get there were still gaps, and then they were also we're dissatisfied with this. Across the room, they were we can't compete with these other groups that are forming. And so, I at one point had to step in and say, look, we didn't go through all of this. I'm not here as the coach for you guys to stay the same. You've heard what your leader has to say on the topic. He trusts you to do the right thing. And this is an opportunity for you guys to either do with or not, right? But I was if the competitiveness, if competition is your worry, all you need to do is alert me that it's happening, and I as the coach will, I will address it. I will make sure that it is visible, that the mirror is there, and we'll talk about how we need to pivot and behave differently. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Hi, I have a question about performance reviews. Were these teams going through performance reviews before any of these changes? Did they do that after, for example, interranking? And were there any casualties in the process? Because that sort of process can kind of turn people against each other and kill the collaboration. How did you solve that?
Yeah, from performance review perspective, they were far away from performance review, was sort of in the mid-year sort of thing, so that they were not really thinking about performance review and that. But this actually helped on it because this created a stage for somebody to say, I was able to help mentor somebody. I was able to help coach somebody, and it created some of those opportunities that typically otherwise would have been very empty. One I assigned you a person to train, and that person is not going well. It's that person's fault on it, right? I've been trying to do that. This one really created a stage for performance review perspective. I've actually, instead of having a collaboration on, instead of taking up another story, I went in and helped another team to finish their work on it. And that sort of stories we actually promoted. We actually wanted the team to talk about those stories as well. So and we actually rewarded for those behaviors as well. So from performance review perspective, this actually gives us a lot more ability to say, these are the leaders that I want to be able to promote, and this is the behavior that I don't want to promote too.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that we did by policy is any metric that was displayed was at the hub level. It wasn't at the team level. We had a policy across it that only team level metrics would be shown in team level review retrospectives.
Yeah, in fact, I never got to see any of the teams.
I wouldn't even show them to him.
Nor did I care about it because all I really care about is getting the work done for it, not the team part of it. So that was actually fantastic for team to do their own internal retrospect, but not from the hub or the program perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, we have time for just one more question.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for sharing your case study. And there's some really interesting examples of creating personal safety for the workers that you're talking about as a manager. I'm also interested in the team self-selection. Congratulations on that not turning into Squid Game. But I wonder if you can talk about what were the conditions that led you to have respect for the workers to make that choice for themselves?
Yeah, in respect perspective, the basic, first and foremost, everybody wants to do a really good job of it. And I think people typically naturally wanted to do a really good job on that part of it. What we usually came across it is that, what would make, instead of the question sort of turned around, and I think, to go back to Chet's thing, it's not what you do for your country thing conversation. It's sort of turned around on what are we going to do for the program? It's not stop asking the question, what, this other way around on it. And that would really helped us to, saying, well, I could help somebody. I don't have this particular part. So it really did help in that sense, the culturally perspective. It really changed. That's probably the best culture that, every time I now go to new teams or new organization, that's the first thing I want to try that. Like, can I try that one? If the team's ready to do the sort of self-selection on it, the teams gelled really fast on it. The culture that it created, it was really created by themselves. And it really allowed them. Now that facilitation perspective, you do need to have a skilled coaches in there because that conversation is going to come up, the ugly head's going to come up during those transformation. And if you didn't have a skilled coaches that been through that part of it, it's hard to tell sometimes which conversation to allow, which conversation to stop. We're not going to be disrespectful on it. There were certain rules in the selection criteria that we're not going to personally attack anybody. We did have people crying out for that one. That's when I felt probably the most on it. I'm going to get in HR trouble for this one.
I would say kind of the inspiration for it was we'd been reading a lot of Frederick Laloux. And he's an innovative leader for our line of business. One of the I would say best blessings that I've had working with him is he says, my organization is your lab. You can experiment on things. He was like, look, I'll let you do it. If it fails, know how to fix it. So I would say my journey as a coach is I've done it wrong enough times to know how to do it right now. And I can fix almost any mistake I make at this point. But it's also because he's given me the space to do that, to learn and to innovate as well. So, you need to find that innovative leader in the organization that's going to let you experiment. And then once the organization knows that it can do it, it's kind of the domino effect. Like everybody sees what somebody else is getting and wants to follow suit. And that's how it worked in our organization.
And if you can't find it, I'm on LinkedIn. All right, guys. Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate
Thanks,
that.
everybody.